Hey everyone, welcome back to the Sports Psych Show. Thanks so much for joining me. Today I'm delighted to be speaking with coach and coach developer Sarah Green. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Super excited to be talking with you today. We're going to be talking all things coaching and the psychology of coaching, and I'm sure we can go in multiple directions. Let's start though where we always start. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Sarah, and tell us about your work.
Yeah, so I guess just to be transparent, because my journey started in football, but it's ended in netball. So I guess good to start at the beginning. So being a coach since I was probably like 15, 16 and just kind of like grassroots coaching. Not to dwell on my career history, but probably achieved my dream of coaching for the FA much, much sooner than I anticipated, which was interesting. So started working for the FA as an FA Tesco Skills coach, which was kind of like Trevor Brookings' dream of like working with 5 to 11s, developing lots of youngsters, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and probably learned most about coaching at my time with the FA, surrounded by lots of, football coaching, so I'll backtrack to that. I learned most about football coaching at the FA during my time there, surrounded by lots of people. And then did a few different jobs there, I guess. Ended my time there working in PE and coaching, so working with like Premier League clubs around curriculum delivery. And then I think I just had like a little moment where I was like, I think there might be more to the world than St. George's Park, and which for some people would be like, well, that's weird, but I think I just thought maybe there's a bit more to the coaching world out there. I'd done stuff that I wanted to do. I'd achieved my A licence. I was happy with where I was from a football coaching perspective, and I just saw this job with England Netball, and so here we are, a performance coach developer at England Netball, working with the senior Rosas and the Rosas coaching team and the coaches that work within like our Rosas pathway. So I've been here now for this is going to be my 5th year, I think, and I like love it. And then I guess just on the side to that, like I'm FA coach developer, so deliver on like the UEFA C and the UEFA B. And then I still kind of every now and then dipping my toe in with Derby County Women, supporting kind of like the staff and the coaches there, doing a bit on the grass if they let me.
Wow, so your world straddles 2 sports, netball, football.
Yeah.
Busy. And just for clarification, for those listening in who don't necessarily know, you mentioned, so when we said the FA, we're talking about the English FA, the English Football Association, and St. George's Park, the home of English football, English soccer. That correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Now, I'd love to start by taking you back to the beginning of your journey. I mean, absolutely incredible. A passion to coach at 15, 16. So you had a passion to coach more so than to play?
Well, interestingly, I remember when I was doing one of my coach ed courses, one of the guys, he was like supporting like female coaches on like an FA mentoring thing. And he said to me, "Oh, I don't think you should take coaching seriously yet while you're still playing." And I was just like, whatever. And I was just like, I can do that. And it wasn't until towards the end of my playing career that I did understand what he meant. So I was doing both, and I was really passionate about both things. And I did really put all of my efforts into both things. Playing, I played in what was like a women's college football academy. You know, went and played in tournaments in Spain and played a little bit in America. And I was really passionate about that, but I was always really passionate about coaching and believed that I could do both things up until I realised that I couldn't.
It's interesting, and if I may, I'd like to do a slightly deeper dive into you saying there that you, towards the end of your playing career, you understood what he meant there, because as well-meaning as I'm sure that advice was and is, I actually agree with your intuitive response that why can't you do both or have both? And I suppose where my brain immediately goes there, Sarah, is as a player, if you're interested in coaching, and obviously today we're going to unpack the coaching process, and it is absolutely different to playing. But part of coaching is building a knowledge of the game. You build a knowledge of the game as a coach, and subsequently that's surely got to help your capacity to play because you have more knowledge. I would have thought as a player, being interested in coaching can only serve your game positively. I'd love to get your thoughts on that, and also why potentially towards the end of your playing career you kind of saw where that coach was coming from.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it did serve me well, and I think I definitely I see that now with some of the players that I support who are transitioning athletes. So we do like a player to coach scheme with our elite athletes, but and I think there is a capacity to it, and it helped me. You know, I think it helped my understanding of the game, which only served me better when I was playing. I think where the challenges came were when I kind of developed more confidence to kind of challenge the coach and be like, well, I don't agree. I think this, or it became like more challenging from a relationships perspective. I think, you know, my head coach, my coach at the time, like we were kind of disagreeing about maybe tactics and stuff, or the way that he was actually, like, I didn't like the way that he was delivering with us. Like, I think he was a little bit too aggressive, and I was like, there is a different way that you can communicate that to us. So I was kind of like standing up for what I believed to be good coaching, which became challenging. And then I was doing a bit of coaching with my team, which in turn made my relationship with my teammates quite challenging, because I was just like, oh, it's not really that easy to coach your friends or your teammates, actually. So, yeah. But I think there is that weird period where you're transitioning in and out of kind of like, am I a player still? Am I now a coach? Also, that bit where you're a beginner again. So, you know, that I was transitioning out of playing as a mature, experienced player that people looked up to. And now I was going to the bottom of the pile as a coach, with the perception that people were like, well, yeah, she used to play, but I didn't have any legacy as a coach at all. And that's quite nerve wracking.
Really interesting, some of the things you're saying there, putting my psychologist cap on here. Sarah, straight away, it made me think about, so you became really, really interested in coaching, and you started and you got to learn more about the game as a consequence. And as a result of that, you became slightly more low agreeable. You became quite disagreeable as a player because you're challenging the coach. And I look at it at probably the same lens as you, which is, it's then if you've got a knowledgeable player who's coming across as slightly disagreeable, they're disagreeable for a reason. And as a coach, you've got to be able to manage that essentially. And it also made me think of your coaching making you more of a leader. And as a leader, the late great Kobe Bryant talking about leadership being a lonely place. It can be challenging. Hey, look, I'd love to get some reflections from you on the early years of your coaching. If I was by the side of the pitch watching Sarah Green coach at 17, 18, 19 years old, what would I have seen, and maybe look at this through the lens of what you know now, with relation to what you perhaps knew or thought you knew back then?
Yeah, what a good question. I think you would have just seen me basically filling space, to be present, to kind of um, almost inside, probably feeling like I'm justifying presence by speaking, filling air. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's what I definitely felt. Whether like, I don't know how conscious I was of it, because I think I was definitely modeling coaches that I'd either experienced myself or that I'd seen, and I thought that they were good. So I was definitely copying, like modeling their behavior. But I definitely do also think that there was me just filling space, justifying, kind of like being there and feeling like I needed to say stuff, do stuff. Um, And it was definitely just football focused. I definitely wasn't worrying about all of the things that fill my brain now. I wasn't worrying about learning. I wasn't worrying about individuals. I wasn't worrying about, how they felt. I just was worrying about football.
Really interesting. I'd love to unpack some of that. The second thing you talked about was modeling. It made me think of social learning theory, Albert Bandura. We learn from others, but going back to what you said about filling space, let's use that word worry. So you worry less about filling space now?
Yeah, because no one knows what I know, right? So when I'm working with a group, I know them best, and I don't feel like um, I don't feel like I need to put on a performance. I think that's what coaching felt like to me before. It was a performance, whereas now it isn't a performance, and I see coaches worry about that all the time. The football coaches that I'm working with, or like when I'm going to competition, and maybe arguably like there is an element of performance, right? That's what it is. Sometimes they're endpoints, and I do get that, but I also think that's why I know myself well enough that I personally believe that I'm not cut out to be a head coach. And I think I really know that about myself really well. I think I'm a really good assistant coach because I do not worry or care enough about the end performance, because I actually really enjoy working with players and I really enjoy kind of seeing them grow and develop. I'm just not very good at the cutthroat decisions. And I think also I'm a really good supportive assistant to a head coach. Um, but yeah, like I do feel like I'm less concerned now with judgment from other people, because I really do understand my role and myself, and what I'm trying to do.
A few really interesting things there made me think of competence driving confidence, because you mentioned that I no longer need to fill space because I know what I'm doing. I know better than anybody else what I'm doing, and that sounds to me like the uh, the development of your coaching, your competence, your feelings of competence is driving the confidence you have in yourself as a coach. I'd love to get some more thoughts on this idea of coach as performer, because it was interesting as you were saying that. I was thinking, because I I wonder if coaching is along some kind of performative continuum, in as much as it's a keen mix of authenticity and performative behavior at times when needed. What you mentioned, you sort of went back on yourself a little bit and said maybe there's times for performance. Can
Yeah.
you expand on that a bit?
I think because when I was thinking about like as a coach, like you say, there's a continuum, and maybe what made me backtrack on that was kind of like when we're playing in competition, when we're playing in a game, there is an element of like achieving something within that 90 minutes, within that 60 minutes of netball, whatever. And I think on that scale, like when you talked about authenticity, like I think I'm really high on that scale of authenticity. So when I talk about my competence and confidence, it's about kind of the capacity to understand self well. So I know, like, I don't know the game of football as well as other coaches. Like, I don't see what they see, but I'm really confident to be able to say that and share that. So then when I'm working with other coaches, I can articulate that really clearly so that together we can solve the problem. I think when we talk about performance and the ability to do whatever it takes to kind of like maybe be a bit cheeky on the sideline, to kind of like, maybe take the pressure off the players and kind of deliver some of that overconfidence, or to kind of shout and enthuse and stuff. Like, I'm not high on that scale because it does. I don't feel like coaching for me feels like that. Like, I'm really interested in the learning and stuff. So I'm just like, well, if we don't win today because they're better than us, like, we'll just learn something from it. Whereas like, but I understand that's not really helpful when we're trying to perform and we're trying to get an outcome in that moment. But I really appreciate and value that in other coaches. I really appreciate that their capacity to kind of zone out of maybe some of those other things and just facilitate whatever's needed for the performance. So I think it's a kind of a bit of both, or it's about creating a coaching team of people that can support you with all of those roles, because it feels really hard for me to do both of those things. And there probably are people that can kind of have the capacity. It's exhausting mentally, but I think people build coaching teams that where people have different strengths within those roles.
It sounds to me that self-awareness is a skill, is a self-skill that's really important. It sounds to me that you pride yourself on being quite aware of who you are when you coach and delivering on a consistency of behavior. That sounds like that's a real strength of yours. So I'd like to inquire a little bit more about that. When you're coaching, what are your players experiencing from you? What is authentically you that you bring to the court or the pitch, the gym or the pitch every single time?
I think I try to be really consistent, which is something that's definitely like evolved over time. So I think they do know what to expect from me, and I think that's an element of um, being really clear. I think they would probably say that players would probably describe me as quite firm, but I think when I'm saying that out loud, it's probably like just a shortcut to a word of kind of being quite direct with, this is the journey that we're traveling on and this is maybe what I expect from you. And I think some of that is kind of linked to a lot of the work that I did early on around like teaching and like being really clear with like what I'm looking for is, so the old Walton Wilf teaching kind of like, and I think that's really helpful for me. So when we was doing a lot of work with primary school teaching, primary school teachers use like Walton Wilf as ways of saying, we are learning today, which is Walt, and Wilf is what I'm looking for is this, which is part of like success criteria. And I think by me taking that on board, and I use that with the players, it's helpful for me. It provides clarity of our session is going after this today, so we're doing a high press, and so what good looks like is this. So then I'm not hiding it, I'm not keeping it a secret, and I think so I'm providing clarity. And I think that that's what they would say. I also think that they would say that I was really creative. Like I'm really much more confident now to put on sessions with them that are really disruptive, actually. So mentally disruptive, or kind of like I'll put them in situations where we're playing different games to achieve the same topic. And what's really interesting about that is I'm curious about their responses to me. So that's why I do it. So I'm just like, oh, that's really curious. Like sometimes I'll just be a really bad referee and the way that they respond to me. And I'm just like, wow, like, and almost like them checking themselves. And yeah, I think they would say that. I'm not afraid to step outside of that just traditional, normal, let's do a 60 by 40 type passing activity.
It's really interesting listening to what you're saying. I'm going to pick out two words, clarity and creativity. And it almost feels like you're using, there's a tension between them, that you know that you want to deliver in a very clear way to get coaching points across or to explain a specific activity. And then at some point you're shifting to a sense of creativity, which you described as creating disruption. I suppose I don't know if I can formulate a question here other than to say that to you, and what would be your thoughts back?
Um, yeah, like I think the way that we've tried to, because I can see how that would feel like they were like, well, they don't make sense together. But I think during a week of learning with the players, what we tried to do, like when we were at Derby, was almost have like again for, I guess it was for clarity. So like if you're thinking about your week ahead, and we all have our calendars and we want to know like what the rest of the week looks like, so when you can sit down and watch something on Netflix. And that was kind of like my thought. It was, if we let them know what the journey looks like each week. So I was saying, I think tactical Tuesday. Let's have a tactical Tuesday and a thinking Thursday, and that's what we came up with. So on a Tuesday, we would do stuff that was really either lessons learned from the weekend or thinking ahead, and it was more about our shape and it was more about tactical like problems and dealing with that. So we might focus on the high press, but then on a Thursday we did thinking Thursday. So it was more, it wasn't about necessarily about, oh, when we play West Brom at the weekend it's this. It was really internally focused. It was all about us. It was about fun. It was about what do we notice about ourselves in terms of that response, or how can we transfer learning from this tennis ball game to that. And it was challenging. It was challenging me, and it wasn't just the players. It was how are we being challenged as the coaches too, to come up with things that require thought for them. And I think I really enjoyed that rhythm. I really enjoyed that rhythm of coaching, and I think the players responded to it well because they knew what was coming and they enjoyed um, the capacity to try new things.
I'd like to do a slightly deeper dive into both clarity and creativity, starting with clarity. Are you consciously aware of and processing your own communication as you're coaching, or do you just let it happen?
So I think a bit of both. So I will consciously kind of have some thoughts about, this is what I want to do and this is how I want to say it. I weirdly now don't have the capacity. So like when I was doing I really struggle now to plan for questions. And when I was learning to coach and when I was doing some like teacher learning, they basically would make us write our session plans, and they would say you need to plan your questions. And I was like, okay. And I'd probably just pick random questions that I would never ask because I really struggled. Because I'm like, how can I plan a question? I don't actually know what's going to happen. So I don't know what I want to ask. So now I feel so confident that like I'm really curious about a player's reaction, a player's response, that I feel really confident to go, oh, okay, cool, like I'm going to deal with that like this, or generally the group are responding like this. So I think this would be a good question. So I feel in a really good space with that, and if I don't need to say anything, I'm like, brilliant, like there's no questions required from me. And I feel like I'm in a really good position with that, and I've evolved then to like where we started. I don't feel the need to take up space for the sake of it, but I feel really confident to respond in a way that we like I'm required because of what I can see or hear or feel.
Are you ever consciously aware of changing volume, tone in order to deliver messages in different styles,
Yeah,
or to emphasize? Sorry.
yeah, yeah, I am, but I would say I'm less skillful at that. In probably tone, or like I'm not a good hustler. I'm not a good kind of, yeah, let's go, let's go, let's go. Like I don't think it feels genuine from me. Like I don't think I'm very good at it. I'm better at individual hustle. So noticing someone doing something, and I'll be like, yeah, like Jane, that was really good. Like I really saw how you tried. Like I'm good at that. I'm really good at kind of providing that loop back. We've done that, and I think that makes sense. And like we're going to go here next. I'm not, and I think I'm really good at being firm or kind of emphasizing when I really appreciate and value. But I'm not a good. I'm definitely not a good hustle person.
Dwelling on the idea of questions and trying to keep it in line with this form of questioning or line of questioning around clarity. I've definitely had conversations with some coaches who don't particularly like asking questions in activities because obviously the number one thing they'd go to would be, well, it can reduce levels of intensity. But I've always felt that some coaches feel that questions can muddy the waters of clarity. Um, what's your thoughts on asking questions? Is that a tool that you'll use often?
I think it. I think where it goes wrong is our misunderstanding of what we're questioning for and who we're questioning for. So, um, I think questioning serves me well as a coach developer, and I think there's a place for it in coaching, but it's not like, oh, what have we learned today? Not a good question. Like that doesn't, it's not a good question. Like, what, I can't do anything with it. So what am I doing that for? Like, just to be curious about kind of what they've picked up, what they remembered. I think you've got to be sure about why a question feels important. Is it a test? Like, is it a memory test? And like some questions do feel like that. I see people just ask a question that's for memory, but I think the best questions are where we just don't know what the answer will be. And they're the questions that I like using. So I'm just not I'm just not sure what answer they're going to give me, and I feel then that I can do something with that.
You're really interested in learning. Do you work from a learning template, a learning theory, if you like, if I was to get slightly academic about this right now? Or is that something that you might be interested in learning yourself behind the scenes, but you're not necessarily overtly using for your activities and session design?
So I think what's really fascinating about that is I've kind of been on a journey with that. So I think when I moved out of the FA and came into the world of coach development, people love to talk about the academics of coach development, and everyone's like, oh, I can send you a paper on this and I can send you a paper on that, and I'm just like, no, I'm not, like, that's just not for me. But I think because it felt
Mm.
overwhelming at first, and then and to be honest with you, like, I came into this job as a coach developer purely to coach develop, as in, like, I'd done work in football, but I was always a football person talking to football coaches. Right now, I'm in this environment where every coach I work with knows more than me. So my priority was just, I need to understand my job. I need to understand that environment. So I just pushed all of that theory and academics kind of. I just want to be good at my job and be okay with where I am. I think then I got to the point where I was like, maybe I could be curious about kind of what stuff could be there to support, or to be honest, really be reflective about the work, the way that I do my work. Therefore, like, what underpinning theories is that, and that's why I started the masters in coach development, because it was about me exploring the work that I'm already doing and exploring opportunities to really see what are the ways that other people are doing, or what are the ways I might be able to do that, or, and just being, I think, a huge part being curious about my work, but also exploring other ways that we could do things.
How do you feel right now about being curious? How do you feel right now about doing the master's degree? Is it positively impacting your coaching and your ability to develop coaches? And if it is, how is it impacting?
Yeah, I feel hugely positive about my experience on the masters, which is actually quite a surprise to me.
Okay.
I'm not, because I think at first I thought it wouldn't, it might not feel like that. And again, going back to what I said before about transitioning from player to athlete, you being a learner again, and this is me being a learner again about a job essentially that I'm already doing, which I was curious about, like, how would that feel. But I think, and I was also really concerned about being overwhelmed by academics, like the kind of just, that means this and this means that, and I'm not a particularly, I'm a more practically minded person. So if I read a paper and I'm like, okay, but what's that actually mean for me, and what am I going to do? But I'm really enjoying the way that it's kind of set up, and it allows me to just use the work that I'm doing and explore making connections. So yeah, I am. I'm finding it really challenging, but in a really positive way.
Are there any approaches, theories, methods, tools that you're now using that actually come directly from your studies?
Well, the stuff that we've been exploring around, just little snippets really. So, like the bandwidth
Yeah.
feedback stuff was something that Dave Piggott mentioned in one of the workshops we were doing, and I was just like, oh, that's really intriguing actually, and that could really help. With some stuff that we've been exploring as a group with the netball coaches. So it gives me the capacity to just delve into that deeper and go, right, like how might we use that? So definitely like bandwidth feedback. And then
Can you before you go on to anything else, can
yeah,
you tell us a bit about bandwidth feedback? So I'm picturing you in the classroom, Dave Piggott, your lecturer, introducing you to this term, and you in your mind making some connections with the experiences you're having at Derby County Football Club. Tell us a little bit about what bandwidth feedback is and how you are now practically applying it.
yeah. So I mean, people might come after my explanation, but let's see let's see how good I can explain this. So the way that I've kind of interpreted like that bandwidth feedback and how kind of like I've presented it to the coaches is the sense of when we're delivering feedback in a session, sometimes we can, I guess that concept of like butterfly coaching, we can kind of get really distracted by lots of things, and the players might not necessarily know. We've said the sessions on this, but they're just getting information from us about lots of things. So they become less sure about what good looks like. And we're then getting at like a dilution of our capacity to coach, if you like. So I was noticing that. So therefore, then when he presented this idea to me, I was like, right, okay. So it's essentially deciding on what the bandwidth of the feedback would be. Now, as the stuff that I've read, it calls it a corridor of correctness, which I don't like. But in a description to a coach, it's actually very helpful because they can understand it, right? So as I travel through this journey of evolving it with them, we might come up with a better thing. But the corridor of correctness is it helps with their understanding of it. So there's just this corridor, and basically we have to make a decision about whether we give feedback that catches them in or out of the corridor. And we just make it really clear to the players that they can expect feedback either that falls within the corridor or it falls outside, depending on what our decision is as a coach. And then that I think that helps the coaches know when we're planning on how we want to behave, who's going to lead different parts, what will that feedback look like? Do you think it would be questioning? Do you think it would be corrective? Do you think it would be praise? They can make all of those decisions and think about what that might look like, anticipate it, rehearse their performance as a coach, because we've agreed with the players, with the coaching team, our feedback will sit in here, and everything else we'll appreciate, but it's skillful neglect. We're just going to ignore some of those other bits and really focus in on that. Now, that might not be appropriate all of the time, but in some of the stuff that we've been working on, I think it's really made the coaches appreciate the value of just honing in on a few things, not only for them, but also for the players.
I like that idea of neglect, as in we're going to choose to not talk about this because it doesn't lie within our. Sorry, did you say it was critical corridor?
Like corridor of correctness.
Corridor of
We're going
correctness.
to
I beg your
we'll
pardon.
evolve that to kind of, because it's not. I think just going back to what you were saying there, like players get peppered a lot, whether it's with praise, whether it's with try this, do that. Have you thought about this next? Like, there's a lot of information, and that's not necessarily just from the coaches. That could be from their teammates. I was watching an under-13s girls team last night, and they were like, "Play the ball early," like shouting at each other, and just kind of. There's lots of information flying around, so the opportunity for us to create and agree a bandwidth, that the players will receive information from the coaches on. Then the players have to decide, well, shall we give each other feedback that sits a bit outside of that? Shall we stay in that too? and we're informing the athletes what they can expect from us. So it's not a surprise. Like, we're working on the same plan together.
That's really interesting. Just trying to create some connections there. This coaching idea of bandwidth feedback that you've taken from your course, your master's course, you've taken back to your coach developer environment, had conversations with the coaches that you're developing, in terms of how you can utilize it at the club that you're working at. It sounds like it links neatly with your notion of clarity and the importance of that. As an additional thing, listening to what you're saying, and please excuse me if I've misunderstood you here, but it sounds like you're asking, you're presenting this to players. You are going to be experiencing this from us, and you're coaching with a little bit more what we might describe autonomy supportive coaching, in terms of you're providing players with a framework in terms of what they're going to experience, but you want feedback from them. You're giving them opportunities to discuss this approach with you. Am I hearing you correctly there?
Yeah. So we, in all of the environments that I work in, I think sometimes the athletes are definitely a result of the environments that they've grown through, right? And they will have experienced different coaches. And so they're evolving through systems and pathways where maybe coaches have given them all of the answers, and they feel most safe there. Whereas actually, like the teams that I'm working in at the moment, the coaches or the teams that I'm working with, the coaches here have very different philosophies around player autonomy, player ownership, high decision making. So this feedback, this bandwidth feedback, is a strategy that I believe, and working with the coaches, helps them know that we expect you to make decisions about this, and you need to generate your own feedback or work with each other to give each other feedback, because in this session you're going to get feedback from the coaches on this and only this. So there's so many positives, because the coaches have got a narrow focus. They're really honing in on and paying attention to that, but the players are forced to generate their own feedback, and to really, if they want feedback on that, like, go and get it. So we're not saying you can't. Maybe at the end of the session they might go, do you know what, did you notice anything else about me? And that they can go and search for that, but the coaches aren't going to offer that themselves up. And I think that's really, really powerful, and it's helping the players develop their own skill sets with communication, generating feedback.
That's really interesting, because I don't know if I'm going to do a bit of mental gymnastics here and take a tumble, but it sounds to me like initially you're putting on a little bit of mental load on the player, in terms of, we need your feedback here. We need you to really think about the process of coaching you, because we want you to be involved in this process. So whenever you engage a player like that, there is a certain increase of mental load on them. But then it sounds like that initial mental load actually can potentially decrease the mental load on them moving forward, because they're going to have fewer surprises during sessions themselves. They've created a blueprint with their coaches in terms of, what feedback looks like, what's being discussed, what they're working on, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, definitely. And just to be clear, like, not all of this is happening in a coaching session. Like, we're not going to turn up one day and go like, oh yeah, we're doing this. Like, in the environments that I'm working in, we're fortunate enough to have enough time and space where we can share stuff with the players, like in the classroom, or kind of through the off season before we get to the international period. Like, there's bits of, we can prepare the players, like they know what the curriculum looks like for the next international window. This is what the themes are, and I think that feels that we're trying to create safe spaces for learning by giving as much information as we can up front about the journey ahead, whilst with that creates enough confidence to know you can expect this from us, we expect that from you, and then when we're not sure, we'll work on it together.
I like that notion of a safe space for learning. It feels a part of a psychologically informed environment, a pie.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd like to, let's stay here. So in your masters, you've learned about bandwidth feedback and you've been able to go back and apply this. Putting you on the spot a little bit more, would you be able to pinpoint another piece of a concept or a tool or an approach that you've lifted from your studies that you've taken back to the coalface?
Um, I guess not necessarily maybe at the moment like another thing, but I definitely think the reflections that we've done so far on our capacity. I did a reflection on the work that I did leading
Yeah.
into the Netball World Cup. So I reviewed all of the work that I'd done with the coaches, why we did what we did. So, leading into World Cup, we made a decision to do a strengths based. Everything that we did was strengths based, right? So we use Spotlight, the Mindflick tool Spotlight, and I like it as a tool for me as a coach developer because it doesn't give me all the answers. It just gives me a good platform to start, and it generates a really good discussion for me. So it's a really safe tool for me to use. And a lot of the stuff in there around the strengths anatomy and whatever, like we use that as a really good place to start. And then we started using it with the players. So it allowed me to like reflect on that and why that worked, why that was useful. And we made the final of the World Cup for the first time in England netball's history. Right now, I can't be sure that it's because of that, but do I think it was a contributing factor to how we were? Yeah, I 100% do. So it allowed me to reflect on that and then make decisions about would we do that again, and was there a time and place for that? Because we naturally, with anything at the end of that cycle, we had a lot of retirements, so the squad looks and feels very different going in to this next window. So we've got players with less experience, less caps, and so they don't have the base. So when we were saying things to them like you already have what it takes, is that still prevalent? Like maybe not, because they're like we don't know, they don't know. So it allowed me to like reflect on that. It allowed me to think about the context with which I'm working, and then if not that, what? And so then that's how more recently I've arrived at a place where I'm exploring things that overarching things that have served as well, which is setting out a curriculum, setting out a journey, allowing the players to see visually over the next kind of few months, we'll be working on this and almost theming it. And the reason I've decided to kind of explore the notion of theming things with the coaches is because it helps the whole MDT. So if the S&C coach and the physio know that camp number one is themed around reconnection, they know that they can expect this type of behavior from the coaches. We're going to prioritize social connection. We're going to prioritize making sure that they have enough time to connect with staff and with each other. So we're not going to pepper them with like loads of workshops and this, that, and the other. So I think it helps everybody know and really think about what does my behavior look like if we're prioritizing reconnection.
Each camp is themed in order to engage with the kind of consistent behaviours that you'd want coaches to engage in, and across the MDT, the multidisciplinary team. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, and it's not kind of like dead prescriptive. It's just more to kind of help us when we sit down and plan the weeks to go, right, okay, if we're coming in for camp one, they've basically had a whole season away from us playing back in their clubs. So they've not seen us, they're out of camp rhythm. If we just give it a theme of like reconnection, then we know if someone comes and says, right, I want to do a PA workshop, we can sit there and go, actually, is that right for this week, or should we do that next week? Thinking about their physical load. The first 3 camps back in an international window usually have a high physical capacity to kind of like getting them back up to speed with international play. So it helps with the decision making. It helps with check and challenge. So I can sit there with the coaches and go, actually, like, could we push that to next week? Because might we do a walk and talk reflection here? Like, might that serve us better this week than next week? And I think it's about having a curriculum, having some themes, really, really help us check and challenge each other with how we want to travel the whole journey, rather than just individual hits of sessions, rolling from one session to the other. This is about curating an environment for learning that is longer than just one technical session.
There's a framework in place. I know people don't love the word structure, but there's a structure in place that helps coaches engage together with certain behaviours. As you say, it's not prescriptive so much, and it could be very emerging as to what those behaviours are, and very adaptive and flexible by the sounds of it. But at the same time, there's an organisation to what you're doing, to the behaviours that you're engaging in, that you want your athletes to see.
Yeah, and the way that the window works is that there'll be camps, and then there'll be a competition, and then there'll be a few more camps and then a competition. So we've got like some peaks within that, right? So then we're coming back into camps with the opportunity to reflect and refocus. So we're not losing learning, but the reality is we're coming off playing one opposition, and then we're coming back into a camp to prepare for playing another opposition in a few weeks' time. So we need to reflect on that and then refocus. So I just think these are around. They're not. It's not prescriptive. They're guiding. They're literally like little guiding lights that go, do you know what? Have we lost our way a little bit, and are we just prioritizing the doing, and we're not thinking about the other stuff? And that's all it is. It's to help us kind of go, oh, we might have like lost our way here with this. We're just thinking about the data. We're just thinking about the GPS, the heart rates, whatever. That are people like we've lost our way a bit, and that happens, right? Because when we get drawn into the grind, when we get drawn into results and things like that, it's really easy. I see it all the time with football clubs. We lose a few games, and then you'll see their next week's schedule. They'll be doing PA sessions where they'll be taking a deep dive into what happened and what went wrong. But they win the next game, and then there's no deep dive about why they won. So what I'm asking coaches here is to be like really thoughtful about their processes, regardless of what happens. And yeah, like I just think but also bear in mind, my job, my role, I have the capacity to do some of this thinking for the coaches and to check and challenge them so that they're the ones doing like the delivery. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm that annoying person there all the time with them going, how do you think that went? And how can we use that to think about next time? But, so I understand that not everyone has that annoying person.
Not everybody has those resources, absolutely.
Yes.
Again, I'm hearing everything you're saying in many respects. For me, and I suppose this is a personal opinion, can come under the title of PI, psychologically informed environment. It's an interesting what you said, that holding that juxtaposition between the data and X's and O's, I suppose, what we've got to do to try to win these games and develop our players in order to win these games. We've also got to humanize things, and that environment is absolutely critical. And talking about environment, everything you've said reminds me of the importance of retaining a sense of consistency of behaviour, especially with the coaches, in order that players see consistency, and also to manage the emotional temperature of the team and the organisation. I think. I'm keen to return, and again, I think because I'm keen to return to this idea of creativity, clarity, and creativity, because I think everything we're talking about there serves clarity, creativity. At the beginning of this conversation, you talked about being somebody who, very much thrives on being an assistant, and you spoke about, probably not. It made me think of your passion doesn't necessarily lie in the competitive side of things. I'm not saying it doesn't, but it's less weighted and more the learning side of things. However, when you talked about creativity being about disrupting players, that felt like it had a little bit more of a relationship with creating competitors. To create competitors, they need to be able to deal with the challenges the game throws at them. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it probably sits within my preferences around developing players that can cope and thrive. So, like, I want to. One of the things that I reflected on recently was we're constantly in situations, whether I am preparing coaches or whether I'm preparing athletes, to prepare them for things that we actually don't know what's going to happen, right? That's the reality. As much as I can do sessions, as much as I can kind of talk about stuff, we can reflect on our experiences. Nothing's ever going to happen in exactly the same way. So we're always preparing for the unknown. And that's I find that so exciting. But what that means is I need them, as much as that I'm teaching them something, I need them to be able to cope with differences, like be adaptable, flex. So they make a connection. Oh, Sarah said that actually, when that happens, we might press high, right? Or when that happens, try not to lose our heads and be not that the referee makes a decision, and because behaviour is really important to me, and I think that's as a result of my work within girls' centres of excellence when I was younger and learning how to coach, is that I was very firm on disrespect to officials. It wasn't. I didn't value that. So, and I think I always find it a waste of energy, and that's how I describe it when I'm coaching. I'm like, we don't need to invest in that. In the history of time, I've never seen a referee or an official make a change in their mind, like ever. So, what I need you to do is get back into what is the next action. What is the next action? So, for me, it's about helping players cope and be adaptable. Like, I'm not saying that if something happens and they look to me that I'm not going to help them, but I want them to feel like they know what to do. And so part of that is being a bit disruptive, is putting on things that they don't know what to do and that they see struggle. So I like the concept of desirable difficulties, and I'll talk about that within my coaching and coaching practice all the time. Like, it's not just about making things really hard, but it is about making things desirably difficult. Like, it's supposed to be hard, like it's supposed to feel uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean that we have to see them struggle. It just means that we're all informed about what their range of coping looks like, whether that's behavioral, whether that's skill, and then we know what to do and we can kind of work with that.
Would you be able to pinpoint a specific activity or specific process that helped your players experience what you call a desirable difficulty?
I guess it was more so a few seasons ago in when I was coaching in football, and I really was like actively the assistant coach then. So 2 nights a week coaching every Sunday on the touchline, and we were having a lot of issues with more like reactive behaviour, and it was seeing us lose kind of momentum
Yep.
in the game, which, if in football you're on top and then you lose momentum, it's really hard to kind of gain that back, at times. Or,
Yep.
it was causing a lot of issues with kind of within the team in terms of that disruption. And I think what I tried to do was go like, what is this about? And actually, what it really was about was the capacity for us to deal with individual error and to own it. right? So we just weren't individually owning that we made a poor decision, and like it was okay to go, I could have released the ball earlier. Like I'm literally just kept hold on to the ball, lost it. Everyone's kicking off. I'm then kicking off. The coaches are mad with me because I look disrespectful. It was just a cycle and a spiral of like events, all from an individual decision. So we had to play around with some activities that were like intentionally disruptive around decision making. Either like we would just play a game on the indoor dome at Derby, and it was around intentionally. There were times where you have the flexibility to kind of go, no, the ball's out, that's this team's ball, and there would be carnage as a result of that because they believed that that was the wrong decision. Or it was just simple things like a multi ball activity where the momentum had swung one way, and then actually you just blow a whistle and now a ball had been dropped in over here. So momentum, physical momentum, and also space, time, in terms of being in someone's territory and now you're not, you were attacking, now you're defending. It just changed their perspective on that. And that to me was, do I think they understood it? No, at times they didn't. And so the more we did it and the more that they became curious about their responses, because I verbalized that. So I verbalized, oh, I'm curious about the way that you've responded to me then. Like, let's think about that, and let's think about the way that that's impacted you on the next few minutes. Or I would verbalize how their responses made me feel, because they do care about me but they don't care about the referees. But I was trying to help them understand kind of like those emotions and the impact of those emotions on me, and the impact of those their emotions on my decision making in that game. So by no means am I an expert in that, but I was trying to help them understand the capacity to kind of perform whilst feeling like they'd been hard done to, and just playing around with a game and really, but being explicit with their decision making and really calling them out or individually and just being curious about their responses to it.
It sounds to me, listening to you, where my brain goes when I think of what you were doing, it sounds to me like you were working on a combination of mental skills and teamwork there. From a mental skills perspective, in very, very simple terms, being able to retain a sense of focus of attention, as you said, next action, and staying connected with the game. Essentially, that's a term I use a lot with athletes in team invasion sports. Stay connected with the game, no matter what. And the other side being teamwork, being actually having an awareness and an understanding of how one's communication impacts the emotion of somebody else. So that had a real team feel to it. And I suppose you could also talk about leadership there, but it sounds like it's setting up scenarios, contextual scenarios, in order to develop mental skills and teamwork.
Yeah, and because at that level, the head coach and I, we're A licensed coaches. We know the game, right? And the players that we were working with had played at the highest level of the game. Some had played for England. They knew what they were doing. But what wasn't working well for us at times was the cohesion, like their ability to kind of like work and respond together, their decision making. So all of that stuff we weren't going to get by putting on a UEFA A license phase of play session. Like, we weren't. That wasn't going to serve as well. What we needed to do was highlight to them some of the other stuff and we could do that in really basic little five-a-side games or little 3v3 activities, or we might do it through like I don't know, we played it ultimate frisbee. Ultimate frisbee is a really good invasion game because there's actually no referees, right? So basically then if they're disputing a decision, they have to resolve it themselves, right? Which was really intriguing. And so we do little fun creative stuff like that, and I really came alive as a coach with that because I was given the freedom to do that. I was passionate about it. I wanted to be able to offer an opportunity to go, I think we can do this in a really different way. And like I thrived off it, and I think it gave us some really interesting moments to work with the team, which we wouldn't have got if we were just doing football sessions.
And I particularly like the idea of trying to teach these skills using, for example, other sports like the frisbee example you use, because actually it could nullify the ability of some players who perhaps have a great deal of ability, a great deal of skill in their feet, if you like, if we're talking about football, soccer here, who might have a penchant to sort of have a go at others. In frisbee, you equalize abilities quite a bit, and so it gives them a chance to understand what their communication is like. I really, really like that idea. I also like the way that you've connected it to momentum. I find so much of my work in football, soccer, and other team sports is trying to help coaches, I suppose, to help me intellectualize these things, but help coaches intellectualize what's going on, sense make on the pitch. And that momentum piece, I think, is really interesting. How momentum is attached to how you deal with things in the moment, win your moment rather than lose your moment. And winning a moment could be winning the emotional battle, which then is linked to mindset, or in my language, a high performance mindset or a low performance mindset. So it's just trying to find little ways to help athletes understand this.
Well, yeah, I think on the momentum bit, I talk a lot to coaches who talk to me about momentum, about sometimes having circuit breakers, and in particular, like if it could be going like in a really positive way, and then you're not sure like if you can sustain it, so you can kind of like circuit break that. And if it's not going your way and you just think, God, like we're up against it here, how can I break that? But also for coaches, so we had a lot of talk as a coaching team leading into the World Cup about noticing what we know about ourselves under pressure, when we're good, all that kind of stuff. And then how the coaches would circuit break each other. And I think they're just really important conversations. Like, what do we recognize about each other if we're getting lost in the game and like I can't then make objective decisions? How can someone circuit break that for me? And it can be as simple as just someone putting their hand on your leg or your shoulder, and you them grounding you back. And I'm just like, yeah, that's really clever and that's really smart. And I just think momentum is so important to manage for athletes, but also the coaches, and not forgetting them as part of that.
I think you've hit on something really interesting there, because obviously we talk a lot about momentum being a behavioral thing. We've got momentum for us in the game, we've got momentum against us in the game, and you've related it also to coaches. But momentum from a mindset perspective, we as human beings build momentum of thought, emotions, and feelings, which eventually engulf us, and they engulf us quite quickly. And I love that idea of a circuit breaker to flex away from perhaps a momentum of unhelpful thoughts, emotions, feelings, to shift back to the helpful.
Yeah, yeah.
Sarah, what a fascinating conversation. Absolutely brilliant. I can't thank you enough for this. I know that you will have tapped the interest of everybody listening in. We've connected ourselves via X. So how can people find you, follow you online?
Yeah, I got a bit confused then when you said X, but that is what it is now, isn't it? But yeah, on X, on LinkedIn, just Sarah Green. Just give me a search. I'm happy to connect. I'm always happy to chat and chew the fat about coaching, and just be curious about how people apply any of these things in their world. Really, like especially in other sports. Obviously, I'm curious, and I know most about football and netball environments at the moment, but yeah, I'm also really curious about just other sports and just what they experience with any of the things that we've spoken about.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Sarah.
Thank you.
Well, everybody, I really enjoyed that episode, and I'd love to hear what you, the listener, think. So please do get in touch via X or Facebook or through my website, danabrahams.com, to tell me what you think of the show. And if you do have any suggestions, I'd be delighted to hear them. I'm already looking forward to next week's episode. Bye for now.